everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We have an exciting topic for you today. This is a topic that we get a lot of questions about. It's kind of a timely subject. We're going to be talking about how to replace Solution Manager without rebuilding the past. This is a real opportunity, not just to solve for how are you going to deal with the fact that Solution Manager is going towards end of life, but still have the opportunity to build some next generation processes that cover not just your SAP needs, but all of your needs across SAP, non-SAP applications, because we know everybody has a very diverse landscape that they need to be able to support. And that's what we're going to be discussing with you today. So we're going to get into that. I'm just going to walk through a quick presentation so you have some background on who we are as CoreALM. So let me start with that. So CoreALM's been in business for over 15 years now, and the company was started when our CEO and founder left his position at SAP as the head of the ALM practice. Many of our team actually previously worked at SAP together, and so there we saw some opportunities because there was really nobody that was out there, a service provider that was out in the landscape that covered everything to do with application lifecycle management specifically for SAP. And so Labanat saw that gap and decided to found CoreALM to do exactly that. And since that time, we've been serving customers, large and small, but many large customers that we have been providing those ongoing needs for in terms of, how do we provide support for SAP customers on application lifecycle management. And for that, we really saw an opportunity. It was about 2018 when we realized that many customers that run SAP also run other applications. And for those other applications, they use applications like Jira, Azure DevOps, ServiceNow to manage the flows, the projects associated with their non-SAP applications. So we saw an opportunity to really streamline things and try to, minimize the need to have two separate processes. But at this time, many companies still have very distinct processes for SAP changes versus non-SAP. And so we're going to talk today about how we can help you to unify those processes. Like I said, we've done this for many large customers. Some of the companies that we've worked for have very strict requirements for security. We look at some of the financial institutions that we support where security is absolute paramount, same for military and defense type companies. We also have companies that are in the life sciences space or, require regulated processes. And so, obviously that adds more, stringent requirements onto, the change process for that, because everything has to be properly documented. So we've covered the gamut in terms of those types of requirements. I'm going to speak a little bit about the business transformation cycle in the way that we think about it and the way we see it. To start off with, we break it into three major phases, and we see it as a continuous improvement cycle. So that's kind of what's really important here. So to start off with, there's always the process improvement side. Changes generally start from the idea that the business wants to do something differently than the way that they do it today. And so they have to kind of take a look at the process and see what are the goals or the opportunities that we can do to improve our process, to make it more robust, more efficient, to add new business models. And so we start with business process improvements. Then, of course, we have to manage all of those changes, either like a project, could be, a big project for a massive business transformation project, or it could be a system upgrade, or even just small ongoing maintenance updates. But either way, we have to manage all those activities, make sure we maintain that SAP solution as part of that change process. And then, of course, at the end, we go to deploy and operate, where we actually release those changes into the production environment, which can sometimes take a complex path depending on your landscape. And then you have to operate that landscape. And so that may include monitoring capabilities, making sure that the system is continuing to respond, but also collecting up the information as to whether or not we're achieving the goals that we set out to achieve on the planned process improvement side, and then create that closed loop so that we're constantly learning what is it that we need to do, how do we do it, and then are we achieving the desired results, and then we go back to the beginning and we just continuously improve. So that's the important aspect. And to support all of those different steps in the process, you need many different capabilities. We have just some of them listed at the top of the page here, and I'm not going to read them, but you can see all the way across. There's different capabilities that you need to be able to do. And there's many different options as to how you serve those capabilities into your application lifecycle management process going forward. So if it's on the process side, you can use tools for SAP specifically or non-SAP, but SAP provides Signavio and LeanIX for sort of system capability analysis, and Signavio for process management, as well as requirements. And then, Cloud ALM does a pretty good job across the board for SAP changes, although not too many people use it for non-SAP. And then, of course, SAP has other applications like Tricentis, which includes like Live Compare or NeoLoad or Tosca for automated testing. Live Compare helps you do your change impact analysis. So all of those tools are there and available from SAP. But on top of that, people use other applications like Jira for agile development, Azure DevOps for DevOps style kind of CI/CD automation processes, and then ServiceNow for change management as it tends to be used for in the environment. And so there's many different applications. The complex part is that many of the different capabilities that are here are overlapping. And so, maybe you're making a change in managing that change in ServiceNow, but then you're also tracking that change in other tools like Cloud ALM or Solution Manager like Charm today. And so it really creates a bit of a conflict almost as to which tool is driving and how do we maintain synchronization across all of those tools for those different applications. So that's exactly why CoreALM exists, because we see ourselves as the unification layer. So what we do is we provide integrations into Cloud ALM, directly into SAP, into Jira, Azure DevOps, ServiceNow, and as well process integration with Signavio, Tricentis, Live Compare, test automation. So we're really trying to bring you a unified process. What the goal is there is to make it so that you can have one enterprise-wide process to manage all of your changes, all of your projects that spans across SAP and non-SAP and allows you to kind of have one continuous process across the board. So that's really the promise. So if you're thinking about migration from Solution Manager, you shouldn't think about what are the tools I need to replace Solution Manager as it exists today. You should be looking for opportunities for how can I actually improve the process so that I can get some additional benefits. Why do I need to do that? Well, we're going to get into that in a couple minutes. Right now, I just want to give you a quick overview of our products and I'll show you how that fits. Of course, we have our Solution Manager connectors, which we've had, for many years, and we've got customers that have been running on those for a long time that are now in the stage of migrating. And then they have different options. So Cloud ALM does cover some of the capabilities that used to exist in Solution Manager, but not all. And so because of the gaps, especially as it relates to transport management, we've introduced direct transport management in Jira, Azure DevOps, and ServiceNow. So it does not depend on Charm, and it is completely standalone and built into those other applications such as Jira, Azure DevOps, and ServiceNow. So you don't need any other screens. You can manage all of your transports, all of your SAP changes directly from a single tool. So that's how you can keep things in sync. And that can be used in parallel with the Cloud ALM connector. So you have Cloud ALM as part of your mix as well for additional things like automated testing or monitoring. So all of those capabilities are possible. So what are some of the opportunities if you get to this place where the promised land, where you have this unified process? Well, what it does is it allows you to shift left and automate a lot of your change processes. So for instance, when it gets to the point where it's time to test your solution, you can be automatically running code vulnerability checks, code quality analysis tools. These can be kicked off in a kind of automated way. So it happens at the right moment in your change process. You don't have to request it or do it manually. And all that information can flow back into your change reports. You can also deal with external code repositories such as GitHub. And then you could manage to make sure that if you have a complex landscape, that all of your changes across those landscapes are maintained in sync and that you're not creating conflicts between your landscapes that are going to be hard to resolve later. We can also ensure that you're sequencing all of your transports in an appropriate way and give you the ability to manage those transports en masse. And that could be at the project level. Maybe you go for your weekly CAB reviews, and in those change advisory board meetings, you approve a set of changes. You want to be able to do them all at once. You don't want to have to go kind of one by one through those changes. And that could be done on an automated basis. That could be done on a schedule. And all of that, simplification should be there. But it should have all the capabilities of CHARM, so downgrade protection, all of those different cross-reference checks to make sure you're not missing any dependencies in your ABAP code that are not part of the transport set that you're trying to move. So you're going to have errors when you import. We need to do all of those checks in advance. So that's going to save us time. But if you have code that's outside of SAP, you may want to trigger automated build for those code at this point in time, so that when you're releasing the code, you have the latest version. And this could be where you would insert as well things like change impact analysis. We have customers that are using change impact analysis in order to understand the impact of those changes before they get them ready to import into production. They want to make sure they understand the affected areas so they can make sure they've done the appropriate level of testing. That could be automated testing or that could be manual testing, but they're covering off their risk based on the functions that they're using most in the system today. So that's a great feature. And then of course, like I said, test automation can be kicked off. And then there's a host of other things: digital signatures, importing according to a schedule, synchronization of like SAP ABAP transports in your core. But as we get to clean core, we need to make sure that we're also moving changes for non-SAP code. And that could be in BTP using CTMS, which is the cloud version of transport management services, or it could be even some other non-SAP related code in a different platform. So all of this can be brought together so that as you're orchestrating your changes, you can automate the flow of all of those activities across all of your applications. Because generally, if you're going to make a change, you're going to cover SAP and you're going to cover the non-SAP applications, and your change can actually be designed to include all of those things. So when you manage the status of those changes, automatically you're handling all of those different areas. So that's what we're going to talk about a little bit more today. And I'm going to introduce my guest, Valdrin Spihai, who's an ALM architect and is an expert in our applications. He's going to talk about some of the tools in a little bit more detail. He'll also take a step back and make sure we catalog and review all the features of Solution Manager that you might need to replace one way or another. But I just wanted to leave you with this mindset of don't try to just replace like for like. Take this opportunity to retool a little bit. It doesn't have to be a massive change in the way that you do things, but you can just insert the right process so that you can make a unified process across SAP and across non-SAP. Just some quick links here I'll put up on the screen. You can scan these barcodes with your phone, or the URL is listed there. The first one in the top left, we publish a weekly newsletter on LinkedIn. It's called the SAP ALM Navigator, and it's a great resource where you can just pick up information. We actually have a topic related to migration from Solution Manager that we posted last week, and there's another one that's going to go out later today on a similar topic, kind of dives even deeper into this subject of migration. So please do watch out for those articles. If you go onto LinkedIn Navigator, just follow this link here. You should be able to hit the subscribe button and it'll notify you for any new topics that come up. We also have future webinar topics. So if you appreciate this webinar, you can monitor this page. You can go back and sign up for upcoming talks and events. And then if you actually have a question that you'd like to ask us directly, or if you'd like a personalized demonstration or even a proof of concept, so you can try this out in your environment where you get a real sense of how is this actually going to work for us, and is this realistic as a replacement process for the way that you manage changes for your application today. Whatever your needs are, or if you just want to ask a question, that's great. We're happy to help out. That's the barcode in the bottom right. You can go to corealm.com/free consultation. The other way to get there is just go to our homepage, corealm.com, and in the top right corner of your screen, you'll see a button that says talk to an expert. If you click that and fill out the form, that'll come to us and we'll get right back in touch. Okay, so that's what I wanted to share with you today. Thanks for listening. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce our guest, Valjan Spihai. Welcome, Valjan.
Thank you, Steve.
And so I've just switched it over. You should be able to present and bring up your screen here today.
Very good, thank you. I'm sharing my screen and you should be able to see my presentation with an agenda.
Looks good.
Thanks again, Steve. Welcome, everyone. My name is Valjan Spihai. I'm a solution architect with CoreALM. So in today's agenda, we're primarily going to focus, for example, on the transition from SAP Solution Manager, but not necessarily just into SAP Cloud ALM, but also in alternative tools, which we have built some here at CoreALM that we're going to go through as well. But the goal is to educate you how you can migrate from SAP Solution Manager to either SAP Cloud ALM or an alternative tool, for example, if there are some limitations where Cloud ALM does not meet. Towards the middle of the presentation, we're also going to go ahead and compare some of the features of SAP Solution Manager and SAP Cloud ALM. The reason for this is it's going to give you a pretty good idea as to if Cloud ALM can support some of the features that you currently use or something that you want to improve, for example, to see if Cloud ALM is able to accommodate those as well. Then on the fourth topic, we'll also discuss implementing and optimizing your new tool set. So for example, after implementing any of these tools, what is the goal to always improve and optimize as you go through these changes. Last but not least, we're going to go through a live demonstration of one of the products that we have built that's an alternative to SAP Solution Manager, primarily focusing on managing your changes, for example. So we'll go through a demonstration in that. And then last but not least, we'll go through questions and answers. Feel free to enter those questions in the chat during the session. Then what we'll do at the end, we'll have one of my colleagues read out those questions so everybody understands the questions that are being asked, and then we'll try our best to answer them. And we cannot, we can always schedule a one-on-one session for us to go through those answers. And maybe if there's no answer, we can find some alternatives and then have some general discussions around those topics. Initially, so we'll start about really comparing the ALM functionality and what you currently use in SAP Solution Manager. There's, for example, a ton of capabilities such as project management, process management, test management, and charm, but I want to highlight some of the major ones that we work with most of our, I would say most of our customers that are currently using and that are trying to transition from SAP Solution Manager into an alternative tool, which one of the main areas that our customers are initially looking for an alternative tool is around change control management or charm, for example. The second one would be possibly around test management and process management. I would say that those are the three main areas that our customers are heavily used in SAP Solution Manager. And then in addition to that, also on the operations side, such as technical monitoring, business process monitoring, etc. In case you're using any of these features in a SAP Solution Manager, you'll also have to find an alternative in the future as to, or now start planning that. And if you're going to migrate some of these in SAP Cloud ALM, and what are some of these areas, for example, that SAP Cloud ALM supports. In case Cloud ALM does not support those, for example, there's also the third-party tools from different vendors that you could utilize as well to accommodate those capabilities and continue to operate within your organization. One of those tools, for example, that we'll go through today as a third-party tool is going to be the CoreALM transport management integration, which integrates with Jira, also Azure DevOps and ServiceNow as well. But then in addition to that, for example, if you're thinking of let's say test management, you can also look into, for example, Tricentis as a standalone tool, as a third-party tool, in addition to Cloud ALM as well. And then there's also some other tools, for example, like SAP Signavio. Instead of just using the basic process management for diagram and etc. in SAP Cloud ALM, SAP Signavio could be also a tool that's more advanced, has more features for building diagrams and process flows, and also other capabilities in addition to what Cloud ALM offers. Nevertheless, we'll compare these into more detail in the additional slides that I have. Now, just to, as you plan to really move from SAP Solution Manager into one of these tools, for example, you just have to really look at the roadmap that currently SAP has. So for operation, obviously the end of maintenance or mainstream maintenance for Solution Manager is going to be at the end of 2027, and then there's also going to be some customer specific maintenance. However, that is not standard support maintenance. It means that SAP will not be releasing any additional fixes and etc. on the operation side past 2027. So in case you're using technical monitoring, business process monitoring, you have to start thinking about, within this year, the next year, of how are you going to migrate this into another tool as well. Also, if you're using, for example, Solution Manager for implementation and ITSM, so of the other functionalities, this does support extended maintenance until the end of 2030, and then from that point on, it's only going to be customer specific maintenance. So meaning that, for example, if you're using Charm and etc., you do have some time to think about to migrate. But however, if you're using multiple solutions or capabilities in Solution Manager, we always advise that you start making a plan now and ideally migrate from one tool to another rather quickly, so therefore you don't end up with multiple tool sets in your organization where you have to jump from one tool to another, but rather that you'll have a complete ALM portfolio. So in the next subject here, one of the main tools that we have built as an alternative to Charm, for example, and we've also had many integrations between Charm and third-party tools like ServiceNow, Jira, Azure DevOps. So within the TMS integration from CoreALM, what we have is where you can integrate directly from Jira, Azure DevOps, or ServiceNow into your backend, into your S4 system, for example, or BW, or any ABAP and any cloud TMS supported environments. Therefore, for example, you can directly control your transports from these third-party tools. So it has a direct integration with the STMS. And from that point on, you can manage the transports, you can create. We also have functionalities for transport of copies. You can also release and import transports. But in addition to that, it can follow your current workflow that you have in those third-party tools. Or you could also build your own workflow where you can completely control the transports, similar to maybe what you're doing in Charm today. If you are using Charm, where you can have certain approvals and etc., or that you need in order for you to promote these transports from one environment to another. In addition to that, we've also looked into how do we really make this a tool that currently you're used to, for example, that Charm supports, like having CSOL, or having DGP, like downgrade protection, for example. So both of these functionalities are also built within this tool, and they function directly from Jira, ServiceNow, or Azure DevOps, for example. You don't have to navigate to the other system in order for you to determine if you have an object lock, for example, or if you have a downgrade protection check where you're going to overwrite something. We have options such as coupling and decoupling as well. So you can decouple transports. Therefore, if you bring in any new transports, you can always couple them, or if you need to decouple because you need to move a change quicker in the next environment, you can also utilize the coupling and decoupling as well. And we do support multiple deployment options. And what this really means is that we don't require any additional infrastructure. So we're not going to request you to add an additional environment in order to deploy this application. We'll deploy it directly in one of your environments, for example, or we have some other deployment options that you can look into if you can't support that. We also support fully retrofits for if you have an N+1, N+2, multiple project environments, for example. We support multiple retrofits, including analysis for the retrofit as well, which I will touch base when we do the demonstration. Just to give you a quick view, for example, and on the right-hand side, there's actually 3 different screenshots in here of ServiceNow, Jira, and Azure DevOps. But what you really get is that, for example, if you're, depending what type of shop you are, if you're a ServiceNow shop, at that point you'll get an additional view here towards the bottom on the SAP transports, and then you'll have all of the different options, such as you can create a transport of copies, and etc. You can hide and display these options based on authorizations that you build within ServiceNow. And similar also within Jira and Azure DevOps. Again, you'll have these different buttons in here where you can pretty much do everything that you need to in order for you to create and move a transport all the way to production. They also have different methods of how you can control the transports. So for example, it can be based on statuses. Once you're in a certain status, some of these options get displayed, or it could be based or having it all of the options on one status. For example, we can navigate through each one of these without having any restrictions at all. It just depends how you would like to build, or I would say design this. So it's completely flexible. We don't ask for you to write any code. It's all configurable within our UI page of the application that we provide. Okay, now we're going to go into the next section in here about comparing features of SAP Solution Manager versus SAP Cloud ALM. This also will give you a pretty good idea, for example, what are some of the features that Cloud ALM can support, and what are some of the other areas as well that you need to look into, such as third-party tools. So just from a overall perspective, obviously Cloud ALM, it's a cloud solution, so you don't necessarily need to have any hardware or infrastructure. You get a tenant and then you're up and running, for example. So as far as user onboarding and etc., obviously once you get a tenant, you're able to have an admin and create users for other members of the organization as well. In addition to that, there's even from if you think of from a operations perspective, you don't necessarily need any type of agents running in multiple other environments in order to support back into SAP Solution Manager. And you don't need to deploy any type of nodes or support packages. This is all handled from SAP, given the fact that this is a cloud solution. Now, going to and then also the last but not least, which I almost missed, is Cloud ALM does offer some extended memory usage. So let's say, for example, if you are using Cloud ALM for transmitting a lot of data between environments within your different cloud applications that you have, and if you do need additional memory, you can always extend that memory for another, let's say, 4 gig blocks in order for you to get what you require. But by default, the tenant, as long as you are a SAP customer, for example, with a certain support license, you are able to get an SAP Cloud ALM tenant for your organization without any cost. Now, one of the features within Cloud ALM, for example, solution documentation that's slightly different from SAP Solution Manager. So you'll have a documentation repository. However, this has to be connected in such as like a DMS integration within SAP, which there's going to be some related cost to it. There is documentation in Cloud ALM, for example, that you could, completely think of it as a embedded document within Cloud ALM, but it's not something like as robust as, like, let's say Word or Excel and etc., which you may require. So in that case, this is where you, for example, you might require such as like a DMS integration into a content storage. So therefore, you can connect Cloud ALM with that. The other alternative is you can always have a reference URL between SAP Cloud ALM and let's say SharePoint, for example. So let's say you have a business process where you want to link a specific like Word document or Excel document to it, like functional documentation, or let's even say even test cases. In that case, you can always have a URL at the process level where you just state the URL, and then as long as that URL doesn't get changed, obviously, it will always remain there as part of the documentation. And then from a process authoring or diagrams perspective in Solution Manager, we're primarily used to having multiple branches for version in the documentation, for example, depending if you're working on the project phase or if you're working on the maintenance and production support phase. You know, we would push everything or promote everything to production when it's finalized, let's say, for example. However, within SAP Cloud ALM, for any type of process diagrams, you'll have two different statuses, which one of them is going to be a draft, the other one is a published version. So anytime you want to modify these items are going to be in draft status. Once you publish it, at that point it becomes final per se, and it's a final version that we're using in production. So from a simplicity perspective, if you look at both of these diagrams, they're quite similar. You just don't have as many restrictions or multiple branches in order for you to support what we're used to SAP Solution Manager. Also, to talk a bit about the SAP Cloud ALM on features, or primarily on change and request management. For example, in SAP Solution Manager, we had that either an IT requirement or a request for change, and then you had multiple changes, including custom ones that, for example, you build within your organization. Therefore, you start the request, and then you have the changes that went through, you know, multiple or no approvals, depending what you've built within your organization. Versus in Cloud ALM, this is where you'll have a very restrictive workflow as to what you can do. You primarily will think of the requirement being kind of like that request for change or that IT or business requirement, and then you'll have a feature or in the future, you will also have a correction, for example, in order for you to deliver that requirement. And in addition to that, you can tie user stories, project tasks in order for you to deliver such a specific feature. The feature is going to be the one that's going to have the transport capability in order for you to create a transport and move it up the ladder all the way to the production environment. So just from a basic workflow perspective, which cannot be modified in Cloud ALM, this is really what out of the box. For example, once you implement it, these are the 4 different statuses. As a matter of fact, they've added one more in here, which is successfully tested. That's not in my diagram yet, but however, these are the 5 different statuses, or 6, I would say, that a transport would go through. So for example, in specification, it just means it was created. When we are in implementation, we are building something in a development environment, and then we're also going back and forth using transport of copies to in testing. In testing would mean that we are primarily within our QA environment, for example, and there's also some change control authorizations here, for example, that who can approve this for production once it's ready, and then also to deploy it into a productive environment. So you do have some flexibility, for example, as to having some additional authorizations. Also, in addition to this, you can also integrate to a workflow, such as, for example, a BTP workflow in BTP, for example. Therefore, when something is in testing, you can completely manage different statuses in a third-party environment, and then change that status back into ready for production whenever the third-party workflow has been met. So that's also an option, but again, this has to be built outside of Cloud ALM and also integrated back into Cloud ALM in order for you to have a pre-configured workflow, for example, that then it allows you to have additional authorizations on top of what Cloud ALM supports. The testing management, SAP is working quite heavily on this one. So you'll have pretty much support for cloud and on-premise, also for SAP and non-SAP. You can pretty much support all of the testing for your organization using the test management tool, and it also has an integration to such as, for example, Tricentis or test automation for S/4HANA Cloud. These are two native integrations that you could, for example, utilize almost out of the box as well. But in addition to that, there's APIs that you could integrate to any other third-party tools as well. But the testing supports, for example, scoping manuals and automated functional testing, including it has a pretty good visibility on requirement traceability as well. It pretty much has most of the capabilities, such as creating a test plan, having test cases, executing test cases, assigning testers, and etc. And then I know that SAP is also working on additional features such as like copying a test plan and sequencing and etc., which will come into the future as well. Okay, now on the operation side, I only have one slide here. Given the fact that operation is a quite of a big topic, for example, and has many capabilities. However, just a couple of items or that we want to primarily focus on the operation side is, for example, Cloud ALM may not be able to support all of the features that you currently have in SAP Solution Manager for operations. So therefore, for example, if you're doing some type of intense system monitoring, think of it, for example, especially if you are an SI and then you have multiple customers that you're managing currently with your SAP Solution Manager and monitoring, or if you're a client that has, many on-prem production environments that you're monitoring with SAP Solution Manager. At that point, it may be feasible for you to add focused run. Therefore, because focused run just primarily focuses on the operation side to manage and to monitor these heavy on-prem systems, for example, and to ensure that you always have reliability and can add as many as you'd like. Versus in Cloud ALM, for example, I will not say that it's basic monitoring because you do have a lot of capabilities. However, it's not as customizable, I would say, and also it's primarily designed to do a small set of ABAP systems or on-prem systems, rather than, for example, having 10, 15 systems to monitor from Cloud ALM. But again, highly suggest that you at least do some discovery on what all are the operations monitoring features. We do have some webinars around that as well that we go through of explaining, for example, how you can monitor on-prem and on hybrid systems using SAP Cloud ALM, including third-party systems as well. Some of the areas that Cloud ALM might not be supported by Cloud ALM yet, for example, custom code management. So this is where, for example, you might have to look into other SAP tools in order for you to if you're using custom code management, also data value management, for example, especially if you're using to control your data within Solution Manager, you might want to think about a different tools as also a DVM dashboard, but not necessarily what SAP Solution Manager does. SAP Early Watch Alert, this is all moving into the alert workspace. Therefore, this is also not going to be available within Cloud ALM. And then also the system recommendations. This has also been moved to the system assistant, which is really in the maintenance planner. And then last but not least, the business process improvement. So this is the goal, is really to use SAP Signavia, which you do get that feature as part of the RISE contract if you are a RISE client or you have a RISE contract with SAP. And the last but not least, IT service management tool. So SAP will not have any type of service management tickets and etc. or service desk. With an SAP Cloud ALM, this is definitely where, for example, you might have to go to like a ServiceNow or Halo or Jira or one of those tools that are within the enterprise today. Okay. Now, just from if you are looking to primarily transition from SAP Solution Manager into SAP Cloud ALM, there's really like 3-4 phases that you can go through in order for you to really determine what you're using SAP Solution Manager for. Keep in mind, this does not go through, for example, Charm and etc. You can't really move Charm into SAP Cloud ALM or any third-party tool. You really have to redo all of that work. But however, if you're using business process hierarchy, documentation library, custom processes, test cases, you can use the ALM readiness check where you can go and select the data, adjust if required. You can simulate it, and then you can import it to Cloud ALM. This is also a pretty good run, for example, if you just want to understand what you're using in an SAP Solution Manager. Does not mean that you have to move it into SAP Cloud ALM, but you can take a look at, for example, kind of like a repository of things that you have, and then decide from there, what tool would you like to move it? Does Cloud ALM make sense, or do you need to go directly to Signavia, for example, or a different tool for testing as well? Okay, and the next section of this demonstration, what we're going to do is we're going to go through the CoreALM TMS integration, and the goal is really just to show you that, for example, one of the, I would say that one of the most common questions that we get is, what do I do with my SAP Charm, for example? Maybe Cloud ALM does not have all of the robust features yet that you need. This is where, for example, we build an integration again between ServiceNow and how do you manage your ABAP and your Cloud TMS transports, for example, if you use an integration suite or something like that, or BTP services, we can integrate it with ServiceNow, Jira, or Azure DevOps. In today's demo, we're only going to go through ServiceNow, but think of it, the concept is very similar or the same if you're using Jira or Azure DevOps. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create a new change within ServiceNow, and we'll go through one of the standard changes in here. So we'll create a normal change in ServiceNow, and then we'll give this a title. And then we'll just add the title and description. And then let me add a quick group in here. Now, what you'll notice in here is, for example, that I have an additional checkbox in here, or think of a toggle that you will also have in Jira and Azure DevOps. And then once I click yes, I'll get an additional option. The reason for this is that many of our customers use ServiceNow or the other two tools for SAP and non-SAP. So if it's a non-SAP change, you can still continue with your current process flow without having the SAP transports in here at all. But if it's an SAP, then this will automatically populate. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to go ahead and save it. And then what you'll see is that, for example, in here, you'll see that I don't really have any options because most of my options are in assess in here. And then once I go and assess and then I save this, you'll see that now I have a couple of different options in here, which I can create a TR, couple, and refresh. But I can't couple anything yet because I haven't created. But once you click on create, so we're going to say shipping processes for SAP. Then in here, you can have as many environments as you'd like, for example. So this is your source environment. So you can have as many development environments as you need, including clients, just similar to, for example, how you would go through if you were to create a brand new transport. So I'm going to go ahead and click this environment. This is going to be a customizing just to make this quick. And then what we do, we also bring, for example, all of the SAP users into this interface. Therefore, if a user does not exist, in the backend, we're not necessarily going to go ahead and create or allow them to create a transport because we have no one to assign it to. We're going to go ahead and click on create. And then once I click on refresh in here, what you'll see is that it automatically created the transport. And then I have specific shipping processes for SAP, also provided the change number, which is this one, 263, for example, and also created a task as well. Now, what I'm going to do here in the next step is I'm going to go ahead and just click on refresh here very quickly. And then I have this transport that I created. But in addition to that, because I'm also going to go through a retrofit option, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a quick customize and change in here before we move on. And then go ahead and save it. And then once I save that change, what we'll do next is we'll go ahead and release the transport as well. So I'll refresh this very quickly, or I'm sorry, then make sure that table content is logged in here, and then we'll go ahead and release that TR. The next step is in here, for example, you'll notice that now because I have released this task, it currently is modifiable. At that point, it's going to show that I can now create a transport of copies, or I can release this transport. So now I have the option that I can create and import a transport of copies as well in here. So I'm going to click on that option. And then this interface is quite small, so just keep in mind, for example, once I click on refresh, you'll also see a table underneath in here populate really quickly that, for example, now my TOC is created and also is imported into my QA environment. The next step that I want to do once this is done, I'm going to go ahead and release a TR, and this is what's going to release it in my dev environment, for example. So very similar to, think of it like Charm, where, for example, I created a TOC, imported in QA. I can do this as many times as I need to. However, for my process in here, what I'm going to do is I went ahead and release a TR, and the next step is now here. Once it refreshes, I'm going to go ahead and import it. What it's going to do now is going to give me all of the options, for example, that you usually get within TMS. Do I want to, ignore it, any invalid components, etc. So these are all of the standard checks, nothing special. I'm just going to proceed as blank. So therefore, it import the transport in QA. And then given the fact that ServiceNow, you always have to kind of reload this form, so I'll go ahead and refresh it. And then the only step that I'm looking at here now is I want to make sure that it's imported in this client, which is 060. Once that it's imported, you'll see that all of my options in here, now I don't have any additional options such as to import it into production. What I need to do is I need to move this into implement status in order for me to import it in production. So we created the TR, imported the TOC, also released and imported the actual transport in the QA environment. The next step is that now I'm going to go ahead and import this change in my production. Before I do that, I have to scroll down in here and I have to approve the ServiceNow change. And it's going to require a couple of approvals really quick. So we'll do one more approval. And once that's approved, it should go to my scheduled status. And then what I want to do here is that now I don't really have any options, anything for me to really do in here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and set it to implement status and then save it. Now what you'll notice is that once I select this transport in here, now I get an option for me in order to import this change into my productive environment. So I approved it. I'm going to go ahead and import this TR. I'm going to proceed with those options as blank. And then this should now import into an additional environment, which is going to be a TR99 client. So I'll refresh this change very quickly. And then once it's imported, I'm not going to get those options anymore in here, but you'll see, for example, that now my transport is imported. The last import was just now in TRI 099 client, and then this is not imported into production. However, let's say, for example, like I have a N+1 environment. So now if I need to do a retrofit, this is, for example, where my retrofit options is available in review. So before I close this change, I need to make sure that I also have updated, for example, my maintenance landscape or my project landscape, depending on what you're using retrofit for, before I move forward. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first do a retrofit analysis. What this does is it's going to check to make sure that retrofit, this TR or this change that we made in my N landscape can be retrofitted in my N+1, for example. When you click on here, now, because I ran the retrofit analysis, it's going to give you an option at the bottom here with say this retrofit request can be processed in the retrofit category, and then if there's any dependency. We do have a check in here where, for example, if this fails, you would have either a yellow or a red button in here. If it's red, we cannot automatically retrofit it, and then we have to do analysis and primarily possibly only import this change manually by creating a new transport. If it's, for example, green, what we do from here, it's almost automated, where, for example, you select that retrofit request, and then what you do is you go ahead and import that retrofit transport. Now, what you'll see in here is from the auto import logs, what you'll notice is that after it's imported, we'll also get a success status if this transport was imported successfully. So let me go ahead and refresh this. Keep in mind, this is moving a transport from one environment to another, so it just takes a little bit of time in order for us to get a successful status on this one. So you'll get the successful status. You'll also get here the additional retrofit request. Remember that when we do retrofit, it's going to create a new request in the other environment. So therefore, we get this new retrofit request in here, and then we also get the automated import log that is it imported, for example, what client was it imported on, and etc. So therefore, if you want to go, for example, into your let's say into your N landscape and you want to check the retrofit transport, we would go and we would search by this transport, and we would see that it was imported in there as well. At this point, what we would do, it would be your standard ServiceNow workflow where you would go ahead and close it. And then that change would be done. One last item that I also want to show you in here as well within ServiceNow, any of the items that you log in here, such as transports and etc., we deliver some predefined dashboards with our certified integration or application within ServiceNow, for example. So you'll get some overall dashboards as to, you know, how many critical SAP changes you have open, how many are overdue, for example, how many are waiting approvals, and then just a calendar view of those changes as well. In addition to that, you'll also have a transport overview. Because we are capturing transports, let's say directly in ServiceNow, you can see how many total transports you have in a specific environment. For example, how many are waiting in QA to be imported, for example, how many transports are waiting to be imported in prod. So this is a dashboard that could be very good for your release or your change management team. So therefore, for example, they can look at this at any given time to see how many transports you have open in each one of your SAP environments, as long as you're using our application to manage those transports within that environment as well. This is what we wanted to show you today, really to kind of give you some options that you have besides Cloud ALM, for example, to transition from SAP Solution Manager into Cloud ALM and third-party tools. So hopefully it was some education, and if we can open the call now for some questions. So if you have any questions that you have not added to the chat, Unfortunately, because we have so many participants, we don't open the call for questions, but feel free to add them to the chat. I'll have my colleague Doug, who's going to read out the questions, and then I'll try to answer them as best as I can. Doug?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, great job, Valdrin. So first one that we have here is, do you have an STMS connector for setup with Jira? We are using Jira. We're a Jira shop for both projects and Service Marketplace, and want to see if you have a setup.
We do, yes. So as I mentioned earlier, in this session, we only did the ServiceNow integration. We do have webinars around Jira and TMS as well, for example, but all of the functionalities such as a retrofit and etc., both for project and maintenance, are supported by Jira. So, but feel free to also reach out to us, and we can also do a one-on-one demo session as well on the Jira side if we don't have any webinar in the near future.
Very good. The next one, let's see. Your ServiceNow direct to STMS connector was interesting. Who do I need to call to set up a demo? And that would be me. So you can just go ahead and send an email to info@CoreALM, and we'll get back in touch with you and arrange a presentation and go through that process. Right now, those are the only questions I have. Let's see, wait, there's one more here. Do you also have an integration to Panaya from SAP Cloud ALM to manage test defects?
We don't have an integration to Panaya. However, keep in mind that the test suite does have some open APIs, not for everything, but that's possible to do. So I'm not sure on the Panaya side what's available. But that's definitely a topic that we can discuss. We have a few integrations between Cloud ALM and some third-party tools from CoreALM, including our own test management tool. But if that's something that you're looking to pursue further with Panaya, Doug, you can definitely contact Doug again, and if you can have a quick discovery or discussion on it, and see if you need any integration.
Here's another one, is that we're a Tricentis customer, and we want to see about integrating Tricentis in our change and release management process. What can you offer there?
So depending because we went through multiple tools, obviously Cloud ALM has a native integration to Tricentis automation tool, but also if you need to integrate to other Tricentis tools, we can definitely look into those integration options that are not native per se, but are possible. However, from our the change management tool, for example, if you're looking into an integration with Tricentis, that's definitely a area that we are doing some R&D from our perspective. And if you have a call and we understand your use case, we can probably determine exactly what you're looking for, given the fact that it's a broad, I would say, tool of capabilities on both sides.
Very good. That's it. Those are all the questions we have. So thanks everybody for joining today's call. Very much appreciate it. If you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out to us at info@corealm.com. But thanks so much for your time, and we'll look forward to having you on our next webinar.